Oh, sorry. Okay, so these are the results we saw last time, right? So we defined Newton's iteration, right, like this, the Newton's method to compute the zero of a function f, right? And then we define an interval I, right, which is a small neighborhood around the zero alpha, right? And then we prove that if the initial value is lies inside that interval I, then all the iterates x1, x2 up to xn, all of them lies within the interval, right? And also the distance between the present iterate and the 0 is less than or equal to half of the, basically less than or equal to half of the distance between the previous iterate and the alpha, right? And then based on that we prove that the xn converges to alpha as k goes to infinity, right? And then we find an error bound, right? When we approximate xn plus 1 as alpha, then the error is absolute value of xn plus 1 minus alpha, that is less or equal to mn times x minus alpha, xn minus alpha quantity squared over 2 times f prime of xn, right? So these are the results we proved, right? But again, this error bound can be obtained only when you know the alpha, right? Because even though this looks like an error bound, this value is again unknown, right? Xn minus alpha quantity squared is unknown, right? So what we are going to do is we are trying to develop a posteriori error bound today. Right, so let us define a posteriori error bound. Right, so we start with this. Right, so we have xn plus 1 minus alpha is less or equal to, right, this. But, so this we have, right? So we have this. But right, but xn minus alpha is same as xn minus xn plus 1 plus xn plus 1 minus alpha, right? So you add and subtract an xn plus 1. Then you can apply the triangle inequality. Right, but this is less or equal to xn plus 1 minus alpha, right? But you know xn plus 1 minus alpha is less than half. So this is less or equal to xn minus xn plus 1 plus half of xn minus alpha. Right? So you can move this to the other side and simplify, right? or you multiply by 2 and then move xn minus alpha to the other side, gives you xn minus alpha is less than or equal to 2 times xn minus xn plus 1. Right? So now what you can do is you can substitute this in here. Right? Right? But we have this results. So in place of this, you can substitute this inequality. Okay, so once you substitute it, right, because xn minus alpha is less or equal to xn 2 times xn plus 1 xn minus xn plus 1. So xn minus alpha squared is 4 times that. So when you substitute it, 4 and 2 cancelled out, you get 2, and then this. Right. So this is now an error bound, because when you approximate alpha by xn plus 1, right, so then you can figure out this, right? So you can always figure out the value, right? So here, so we already defined what do we mean by mn, right? Right, so the maximum of the second derivative of the function between alpha and xn. Right, so you can say this is open, and so this should be the value. Okay, so that's how we derive the error bound, the posteriori error bound. Right, so this is known as the posteriori error bound. So now let's look at an example. Hello. Okay, so we will see an example. And so let's say Okay. So here's the problem, right? F of x is equal to x cubed minus 6x plus 4. Right, so let me change it to 4. Plus 4. So first thing we will show that this has a 0 in 1. And then using x naught is equal to 1, we apply 2 steps of Newton method. And then assuming x2 will be the approximation for alpha, right? We will try to find a subinterval which contains the alpha, right? So that means alpha around alpha. So we will basically try to find a posteriori error bound, right? So let's do this problem. First part is easy. You have to show that this has a 0 in the interval. Right? So you know f at 0 is 4 and f at 1 is equal to what? Minus 1. Right? So that part is easy. Right? So if you show that f at 0 is 4 and f at 1 is minus 1, so this has a 0 between 0 and 1. Right? So that's clear. They don't ask you to about unique 0, so you don't need to worry about that. Right? So all you need to do is to just do this. Right? So if you show this, then that is enough to show that this has a 0. Right? So then you know you have to find f prime. So f prime is 3x squared minus 6. Right? So x1 is equal to x naught minus f of x naught over f prime at x naught. Right? So you can compute this. Right? X naught is 1 minus f of this is 1 cube minus 6 times 1 plus 4 over f prime is 3 times 1 squared minus 6. Right? So you can calculate this value. Right? So if you calculate this value, you get what? Minus 1 over 3 plus 1 over 3 minus 1 over 3 plus 1 over 3 minus 1 over 3. So 2/3. It's going to be 0.6667. Right? So I round it to 4 decimal places. So this is going to be 0.6667. So then I compute x2. And x2 is x1 minus f of x1 over f prime of x1. Right? So that again, you can calculate these values. Right? So I will leave that part as an exercise and just write the answer. You will get 0.7302. Right? So these calculations, just putting the numbers in the function and calculate it by using a calculator. Right? So let's say we are doing all with the 4 decimal place rounding. Right? So all our computation is based on 4 decimal place rounding. Right? So this part is okay, right? So you just show that at the end points of the interval, the function has negative opposite signs. So at 0 it has plus, and at 1 it has minus. So that's clear. If that is plus at one end and minus at the other end, then clearly you know there will be a 0 in that. You can write it down, right? So then there will be a 0. And then you apply the Newton's method that you already know what is Newton's method. So you just need to substitute the numbers in the proper places, right? So they gave you x naught is 1. So you put 1 in x naught and calculate. And only thing is you round it for 4 decimal places, right? That was not given in the question, but I'm just rounding it for easy computation, right? So 4 decimal places. If they say 5, then you have to do it 5. If they say 3, then you have to do it 3 decimal places. Right? So here we will go for 4 decimal places. And then once you find x1, similar approach, you find x2, because they say apply 2 steps of Newton's method, right? So that completes second part of the question. Now come the third part. They ask you to find a subinterval that contains alpha, assuming that x2 is the approximation, right? So in here, basically, if you put n is equal to 2 here, this is what you are going to get, right? So you know x2 minus alpha is less or equal to m1 over 2 times f prime of x1 times x1 minus x2 squared, right? So in the posterior error bound, when you put n is equal to 1, n is equal to 1, right? Because you assume x2 is approximately equal to alpha. So this should be your x2. So n plus 1 is 2, so n is 1. Right? So when you put n is equal to 1, you get x2 minus alpha is less or equal to 2 times m1, right, over f prime x1, right, times x1 minus x2 quantity square. Right? So here, according to this, your m1 is the maximum of f2 prime of x with x belongs to alpha comma x1. Right? So between alpha and x1, you will try to find the maximum. Right? So that is the only thing you have to find, because f prime you know. So putting x1 in f prime, you must have known this from here. Right? So that's clear. X1 you know, x2 you know. So you can subtract and take the square. Right? Only thing is you want to find m1. m1 is maximum. Right? So first thing, you have to find what is f2 prime, because you want to find the maximum of f2 prime. Right? So you will find f2 prime. That is clearly 6x. And so you know that is 6x. Right? So you are looking in an interval between alpha to x1. Right? 6x is an increasing function. It will go like this. Right? So you know it will go like this. It is a line. And somewhere here you have alpha, and somewhere here you have x1. So you clearly know maximum of f2 prime in that interval is at x1. Right? So that is clear for you. So you know maximum of right? So that is clear, because 6x is a line which goes from 0, right, in the first quadrant, increasing line. So the maximum of that line between alpha and x1 is at x1. So the maximum is x1. That is your m1, right? So m1 is equal to, or this equal to this, equal to that. Right? So you can find this. f2 prime you know, x1 you know. So you can substitute it and get the value. Okay, so you get the value. So that's going to be what? 6 times 0.6667. Right, so you will get some value. Right. And also you can get all the other values, right? So two times f prime is what? This. Right, so you substitute everything in this formula. M1 is 6 times 0.6667, right? Absolute value of x1 minus x2 squared, right? Divided by 2 times this, right? So remember absolute value of this, right? So I have to put the absolute value because sometimes I will have minus, so I have to make sure I have plus, right? So I will put absolute value of that. Okay, so if you compute this, you will get a value, right? So you will get a number. So I believe you will get something like this, 0.0058, right? So you can check these computations, right, by just using a calculator. If the number is wrong, you can change the number and do the calculations correctly, right? So these are, if this is the value, then that is clear, right? So then you know, because of this, alpha is less or equal to x2, that is 0.7302 plus 0.0058 and greater or equal to 0.7302 minus 0.0058. Right? So that gives you a small interval in which the alpha is contained. Right? So between 7302 minus 0.0058, so it's basically for 7244, and then other one is 736 something, right? So just check this. 7244 let's say equal to alpha, let's say equal to 0.7360. Right, so that should be the small interval in which alpha is contained, right? When you are assuming x2 is the approximation. If you change x2 to x3, right, that might be a different value. Right, so that is how you do this posterior error bound computation and then get an approximation for alpha. Right, so that's how we do this problem. So with this, we complete chapter 2. Right? So in chapter 2, in general, we studied about different methods which we use to compute the zeros of the function. Right? What we did first is we defined something called Sturm sequence and use that to count the number of zeros a polynomial will have, right, in a certain interval. And then we use bisection method to compute the zero of a function on a given interval. And then we use fixed point iteration method to compute a fixed point of a function on a given interval, and we see that that can be used to compute the zero of the function as well. And then finally, we talk about Newton's method, right, which we use to compute the zero of the function, right? So that is, these are the main things we studied here in chapter 2, right? So chapter 2 is all about computing the zero of the function, right? So now let's move to chapter 3. Right? Chapter 3 is about approximating by a polynomial. Chapter 3 is about polynomial approximation. So here what we are going to do is to, given a function f, right, on an interval a comma b, what we are going to do is to, we are going to approximate it with a polynomial, right? So in particular, what we do is we find a polynomial that agrees with the function on certain places, right? So this is what we are going to do, right? So if you are given a function f from a to b r, right, so basically we are going to approximate it with a n degree polynomial p n x, right? So by this approximation, what we do is we try to do this. Oh, not. Right, so this is what we are trying to do. Right, so we are given a function, right, defined on an interval a comma b, and then what we do is we try to find a polynomial that approximates the function. By approximation, here what we do is we actually find a polynomial, right, so Pn, that will agree with the function f on certain points in the domain, right? So for some xi's in the interval ab, right? So a polynomial that agrees with the function fi on these points is called the interpolating polynomial, right? So we will try to interpolate, right, by using this. Right? So we will write it down, write down here about what we are going to do. Right, so this is what we are going to do. We are trying to find an interpolating polynomial defined by this. Right, so we'll say P. So the question is how we can find a polynomial p like that, right? So if f is a function and we only know the function is defined on certain points, right? Right. So here first remark is right. So you don't really need to know the whole function, right? So as long as you know xi's and f of xi's, you should be able to do that, right? So let's see how we can do this. So first we have to prove the existence. Right. So right. So first we will do something called Lagrange interpolation. Right. So we are going to develop a polynomial that will approximate f, right, or interpolate f on certain knots, right? Right. So suppose that we have the nodes x0, x1, x2 up to xn, right, in the interval a comma b, and the function f has is defined on those points, so we have the values f of xi on those points, right? First, right, so let us define a polynomial like this, right? So Li of x is x minus x naught times x minus x1 times all the way up to x minus xi minus 1 times xi minus xi plus 1. Right? So there is no x minus xi on the numerator. Similarly, denominator is xi minus x naught xi minus x1, everything except xi minus xi. So these polynomials are clearly maximum of n degree polynomials, right? And they are well defined, right? So here, one thing you can notice that right? So if you put x is equal to xj in these functions, right? So if you put x equal to xj in these functions, you can easily see that Li of xj will be 0 if I is not equal to j. Right? So for example, if j is equal to 0, then you have x naught minus x naught here, that's 0. If j is equal to 1, you have x naught minus x1, that is 0. If you put j is equal to I minus 1, you get 0 here. If you put j is equal to I plus 1, you get 0 here. If you put j is equal to n, you get 0 there. Right? So as long as j is not equal to I, this function is 0. Right? Because somewhere in the numerator you will have 0. But whenever you put j is equal to I, right? So Li of xi, then clearly you can see that when you put x equal to xi, this and this cancelled out, this and this cancelled out, this and this cancelled out, everything cancelled out, and you get 1 only. So clearly you know that this function, right, Li of xj has only two, will take only two values for those xj's. Right? Either it will be 0 or it will be 1. So what we do, we define now I'm going to define a new polynomial. Right, so let me define a new polynomial Pn of x. That is f of x naught, because that is defined, it is a value, f of x naught times L naught of x, right, the first polynomial, plus f of x1 times L1 of x, plus f of x2, L2 of x, right? So you do this. And if you define a polynomial like this, right, so you know Pn is an n degree polynomial, clearly, right? Pn is an n degree polynomial. At the same time, Pn of xj sorry, Pn of xi, let's say put xi. Right, so here, if you put Pn of xi, right, Pn of xi, then fi of xi into Li of xi, that is 1. So this becomes f of xi, right? And that is true for all I. Right, so you can clearly see that Pn of x naught is f of x naught, P of x1, Pn of x1 is f of x1, Pn of x2 is f of x2, and so on, right? Because of this property of Li, right? So Li of xi is 1, all the others are 0. So that is how you can see that Pn of xi is equal to f of xi for all x. Yes. So this is an interpolating polynomial, right? So that is what we are looking for. So we show that this is the interpolating polynomial. And so clearly Pn interpolates f at x naught, x1 up to xn. Right? So this is how we find an interpolating polynomial of a function. Right? So f is given or defined on certain points x naught, x1 up to xn. Then we see that the interpolating polynomial Pn of x can be defined by using this Lagrange polynomial interpolation method. Right? So in the next class, we will try to see an example of that. But before that, we will try to prove that there will be only one such polynomial that interpolates in the function, right? And then we will do some examples as well, right? So we will stop here and then continue the lectures on tomorrow class.